First, Iran today has dismissed a 15-point American plan to pause the war in the Middle East. This according to Iranian state television a short while ago. The Iranian government also reportedly announcing its own proposal today, asking for war reparations and for sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. With me now, Philip Turle, our foreign affairs editor, who's been following developments closely for us. Lots of news coming out of Iran, lots of statements, and a couple of hours before that, lots of statements coming out of Washington. What's your read as to where we are right now?
It's no surprise that we've had this counter-statement by the Iranians following comments by Donald Trump earlier on that Iran wants a deal so badly it's given the US a prize related to gas, oil and the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran dismissing that, saying that the US was negotiating by itself. Then this 15-point plan coming forward from the United States saying that that was also being discussed by Iranian officials. Donald Trump saying that they had very good people discussing it. But now, of course, we have this reply from Iran saying that they're not interested in the 15-point agreement. What Iran is saying here, two things, Nadia, that are important to understand. What Iran is saying here is basically what they said all the way down the line. That is, they want to keep control of the Strait of Hormuz. This is like their key negotiating platform. Once they lose the control of the Strait of Hormuz, they're going to have a lot less to negotiate with the United States, because that is going to keep them in a strong position. So what they want is to charge money for ships to go through the Strait of Hormuz. Friendly ships will pay about $2 million going through. Ships from countries from the United States and its allies are still not being allowed through. That is their negotiating tactic with the United States. But that's not all. As you said, there's also this negotiating tactic about reparations. They want $100 billion worth of reparations from Israel and from the United States. That's going to be a no-go from both of those countries. So there are many other aspects that Iran is not going to give in to that were on this list of 10 points put forward by the United States. Just to give you a couple of those. The first one is to stop funding proxies in the region, like the Houthis, for example, like Hamas, like Hezbollah. That was certainly something that Iran has refused to do right the way down the line, and it would certainly refuse to stop its ballistic missile program, which was one of the other elements on the table being put forward by the United States. So what we've got here is pretty much a stalemate, I think, on the part of both countries. The United States playing up, as Donald Trump has said, saying they're completely desperate, they want to negotiate, we're going to find a way out of this, to put himself in a good light with the United States and with the oil markets. Remember, there's been a 5-day delay on this ultimatum by Donald Trump to open the Strait of Hormuz or face bombing raids on power installations in Iran. That has led to a calming of the markets. But at the same time, Iran knows that it can play the long-term game here. What Iran wants is for the regime to survive. It can play as long as it wants to. It knows the United States and it knows that Israel have got a time clock hanging over their heads to get this war over and finished. The longer the Iranian regime knows it can hold on, the more chance it has of surviving in the long run.
And look, within the last few minutes, and we've heard from the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, Philip, he says, look, this war, and I quote, has gone on too far. He's calling for an end to both the Iranian attacks on the Gulf and obviously the Israeli-American attacks on Iran. But given that we have this American buildup of troops in the region, it doesn't seem that we may be particularly near a close to this, does it?
Well, we don't know what is going to happen next. The whole thing here, and there is that it's very unclear. The messages coming out of the United States are completely contradictory from one day to the next, from 1 minute to the next from President Trump. The Iranian regime has not budged in its demand that the war come to an end and that the regime remains intact. That appears to be the case. Remember, the regime is a despicable regime run by fanatical people, but it knows what it's doing. It's very well encompassed within Iran, so it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I think the big error from the United States was thinking just a couple of days of bombing raids on Tehran and the regime would collapse and that will be the end of it. Well, that's not the case. So that was a total misjudgment on the part of the United States. That's why Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, has just been talking in the last few minutes, saying that the world is staring down the barrel of a wider war. This has gone on far too long, and the human and economic pain will get worse the longer the fighting goes on. So a lot of concern around the world, certainly in Western capitals, in the Gulf, I think amongst people in the United States and also in Asia, about where this is all going to end up at the end of the day. And what President Trump's next plan is. Is he preparing a ground offensive? There are all these troops being built up into the area, 5,000 Marines, 2,000 or so airborne troops coming in. Does that signal that at the end of this ultimatum on Friday, which is due to expire at midnight, that Donald Trump could launch some kind of ground offensive into Iran to win back the Strait of Hormuz or take control of Hague Island? We really don't know where all of this is going right now.